Kraven the Hunter is for the environmentalist girlies with parental trauma. Let me explain.
The heart of this, the core of this story is this beautiful family drama. These two young boys who are the product of this sort of toxicity around their power-hungry mobster father, played by Russell Crowe, who just brings such this menacing weight to every scene. And there's just no love there. There's only darkness, and they just don't want to have anything to do with this family business. It's kind of the thing that sets Sergei Kravenov on this journey down the path of becoming a villain. And then there's really no turning back. And it's bloody and it's full of fury.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. We've got a new theatrical release, and as usual, since it's opening weekend, we will start with a quick spoiler-free section, because I'm kind of assuming that everyone has already made up their mind about whether or not they want to see Kraven the Hunter, and then we will follow that up with a more thorough spoiler section. For my rating on Letterboxd, I landed on a 3.7 out of 5, and if there was going to be a sequel, I would absolutely watch it. There were multiple things that I enjoyed, but also some things that I took issue with.
Kraven the Hunter is the story of the making of a villain.
My son, they are prey. We are predators.
To give you a general idea of what Kraven the Hunter is, I would describe it first and foremost as a family drama.
This is a family drama, and it's got twists and turns, and it's emotional, but yeah, you see Kraven, he takes his fury out on these guys, and it's one after another of relentless, brutal, defiance for sure.
Kraven the Hunter gets powers that give him animal-like strengths and abilities. There are two super-powered villains in the story, which really felt like one too many. It almost felt as though there were corporate figures trying to put too many cooks into the kitchen. You only needed one of those super-powered villains at most. The action was much more engaging to watch because they focused a lot on the physical action itself. You can see Aaron or his stunt performer doing actual physical stunts for much of what you see in those action sequences.
It's really authentic and gritty and grounded in that sort of reality. We shot all of our action on location, and I think that makes a huge difference. And taking an iconic character like Kraven, this wild man, out of the habitat that he feels comfortable in the forest, and throwing him in the urban environment, and seeing sort of man against machine going head to head with a double-decker bus, like, there's no stopping this guy. He's relentless. He's fighting with things that are just his bare hands, and bare feet running across the city. So it's great to do that. They dragged me through the River Thames. They made me run through the city of London. We're in ancient forests. We're running in barefoot in the snow in Iceland. I mean, there was no, we did not hold back on this movie. The action and the stunt team that worked on this, it was insane. They are fantastic.
In general, Aaron's physicality was excellent because it's a lot of very specific things he has to do in his movements, whether he's performing a full-blown fight sequence or just existing as a person with the powers that he has. It comes across in more or less everything he does, even when he's just walking to and from places. I'd be interested to know if he worked with a movement coach, because all I'm seeing online right now is a barrage of negativity for this film, but there were a lot of things in his performance that I thought were worthy of praise. I didn't find him as convincing in Russian. It felt like he was trying to mumble through those lines as if that would somehow make his Russian more convincing. Thankfully, he only really has to use the Russian language in the film's opening sequence, which was posted early for free on Sony's official YouTube channels before the film had even been released in cinemas. Any and all relationship dynamics to do with family drama was some of the strongest material in this story. It really was that and the action.
I am a huge admirer and idolized Russell Crowe, and to be in a movie with Russell Crowe was a dream come true, but also because when I watched this movie, I'm like, damn, we got a Russell Crowe movie here. This is him at his best, dark, menacing. He doesn't hold back. He is the pinnacle core of this movie, and so to work with him was fantastic, and he was brilliant. Ariana DeBose is fantastic. She's a joy to work with. She has some twists and turns in this movie, and I think, which is exciting to see. Fred Hechinger, who plays my brother, phenomenal actor, and he brings the heart an emotion to this movie.
Another thing that I found refreshing about the film was that it wasn't a bunch of propaganda. Most superhero movies are overrun with that. Kraven the Hunter is just a man named Sergei with a whole lot of daddy issues, living out in nature and wanting to find peace, but everyone else keeps disrupting that. His father, Nikolai, is a gangster, so there are always organized crime shenanigans. There are some superpowered villains, and remember, I already said that there's 2 of them when you only needed 1. And to add insult to injury, there are poachers coming onto the land and poaching. And Kraven is not going to sit idly by while such evil is running amok, especially so close to where he lives. And I loved watching every second of that. In addition to trimming one of the superpowered villains, I would have given that screen time back to Calypso. I saw, I think, a 3-second clip of Aaron and Ariana DeBose being friendly and saying hello to one another on the film's red carpet, and that made me look forward to seeing them be love interests, but they barely have time with one another. It felt like they were putting a bunch of setup in as if they were going to have 3 to 5 films to do an entire romantic journey. No, girl, we're right here, right now. You need to deliver the goods. There is no time for dilly-dallying. Before we move into the spoiler section, I just want to let anyone know who's curious about this sort of thing and doesn't already have this information. There are no extra scenes in the credits, if that's something you want to know about beforehand. Overall, I had a fun time with Kraven, mixed feedback, but when you add everything up across both columns, there is more positive than negative. Some of the visual effects are noticeable or perhaps even questionable, but I just assumed that will be the case for any corporate franchise blockbuster from Hollywood. I've definitely seen far worse visual effects in other superhero movies in recent years, so I don't know why people are speaking about this film as if it's significantly worse in this regard than others. I understand that hyperbole is popular on social media, but I also think that it gets confusing for moviegoers if the people who talk about films approach it with the angle of every movie with technical issues being the worst movie ever. You're not actually offering the audience anything useful. How are they supposed to know whether or not they should spend their money on a ticket if every other movie that you talk about is an all-time low of the genre that it's released in?
We made an R-rated gangster story.
You're a criminal just like your father.
This is a raw, gritty, real-world movie.
But now let's talk about spoilers, and since this is a movie that I'm assuming people have already made up their mind about, let's go through the plot in a bit more detail. Aaron David Beckham Johnson sneaks into a Russian prison to assassinate a gangster overlord named Semyon Chorny. Being that Semyon is a high-ranking bad guy, he has a decorative animal rug on the floor of his cell, because apparently when you're a boss, the prison guards let you do some extra decorations of your living space. Aaron David Beckham Johnson introduced himself as Hunter before using one of the fangs from the animal rug to finish the job, and then he escapes into a snowstorm. He can run on his legs, but sometimes he gets on all fours because he has animal superpowers. This is the type of physicality that I really liked because it's a practical way of bringing this type of superpowered individual to life in a way that's believable to watch. Oftentimes, the animal VFX are used for things like bringing animals to life that are going to be hunted, and similar to what I said in my review of Gladiator 2, I'm actually completely fine with animals that exist for that reason to look like VFX, because if they were extremely believable as animals, it would distress me so much that I would no longer want to watch the film. That's just me though, a person who gets very emotional over animals. Aaron David Beckham Johnson gets to an escape plane and takes his top off for a torso-twisting thirst trap. Are you really going to tell me they don't know who they made this film for? You are not fooling anyone. Every superhero film has to have an origin story, so we flash back to his childhood, but more like his teenage adolescence. Kraven the Hunter, before he gets his superpowers, is just a boy named Sergei with a younger brother, Dmitri, who goes by the nickname Dima. Their father, Nikolai, pulls the boys out of school to let them know that their mother is dead, having taken her own life. And you see through various flashbacks and letters throughout the film that Nikolai is as bad a father as he was a husband. His cruelty is his most defining characteristic. And what's really good about the way they present this is that they never make you, as the audience, watch anything that's too graphic or extreme, but the things they do show, as well as allude to, paint a clear picture for the audience to understand exactly what type of man Nikolai is. Kraven the Hunter is meant to be a blockbuster with a greater level of accessibility for viewers. It's not supposed to do something extremely depraved and emotionally devastating for which it will be showered with award show nominations. You're supposed to be able to pop some popcorn, gather around with your friends or family, and watch a super-powered action movie. Nikolai flies his sons to Africa to go hunting because, yes, he's one of those people whom we're wishing nothing but the worst for because it's exactly what they deserve. So as a teenager, Sergei is distressed by this callous cruelty towards wild animals. And then as an adult, when Nikolai tries to hit Sergei, Sergei catches the punch and says something like, "You don't get to do that anymore." Do you see what I mean? That's how you let the audience know who Nikolai is without forcing the audience to watch child abuse. Nikolai is also telling his son that they need to be men and that everyone else is prey while they themselves are predators. Subtlety is not Nikolai's strong suit. And I actually really quite like the way they lean into the animal angle for these characters. Sergei often feels like a lion, or at the very least, a large wildcat. Nikolai is a bear, Dima is a chameleon, and one of the villains is a rhino. It's fun, and it feels like the type of concept you would read in either a book or a fic. And you go, well, I like this, but I don't know if this would translate well into live action. But in this case, it all makes sense for the most part, and they've led with the characteristics, while the physical elements merely enhance that storytelling. Dima has a knack for mimicry. I actually would have thought he would be a bird, you know, one of those birds that can whistle and vocalize to mimic the sounds that they hear. I didn't realize that he had already been assigned this character of chameleon since I was not privy to that source material. Ariana DeBose's character Calypso is also introduced in the extended flashback for Sergei's origins as Kraven the Hunter. She has this potion in her family which her grandmother passes on to her and does some exposition dumping in the process to explain a bit about what the potion is and what it will do and when she should use it. While on this hunting trip, Sergei and Dima encounter a lion who has some prolonged eye contact with Sergei, but then Nikolai pops out and shoots at the lion. The lion grabs hold of Sergei and drags him off, eventually dropping him somewhere where Calypso has just arrived, and she pours the potion into his mouth and leaves a tarot card with him. He doesn't reunite with her until they're both adults. They don't explain how he finds her, but the tarot card helps somehow. Sergei dies for a couple of minutes while he's hospitalized from the wounds from the lion attack, but the potion revives him, and he will eventually come to learn that along with surviving death, he now has animalistic superpowers. Nikolai comes to the hospital with Dima to bring Sergei home, but because Nikolai puts the ew in daddy issues, he has no sympathy or empathy for Sergei's near-death experience. He doesn't want to let him rest up in the hospital. He needs to bully his son, and when Sergei comes home, do you know what he finds out? His father has the lion's head mounted on the wall. So Sergei's had enough, and he's going to run away to some land in Siberia that originally belonged to his mother, and she left to him. And this is where he has his montage of discovering his powers and getting back in touch with his connection to the land, the forest, the wildlife. At one point while there, he spots some hunters who have killed animals just for their horns, and Sergei gives them the day that they deserve. And young Sergei is grief-stricken at seeing all of these dead animals. He's a boy with daddy issues and blood on his hands in a blockbuster released in December. Close enough! Welcome back, Loak Suli.
Oh, my son! No! You're just another man.
This forest becomes his home base, and I actually really like the lair he presumably built for himself. I doubt he's hiring people to come build a secret lair in the forest. When I really reflect on all the moving parts of Kraven the Hunter, I think the best way to consolidate the story would have been to keep more of it based in or directly around this land. Sergei keeps having to run off to other locations in other countries. He has to go visit his brother for his birthday, which will facilitate an uncomfortable family reunion with Nikolai. He has to go meet Calypso, who works at a fancy law firm, and follow a false lead she was given to try to find the bad guys who kidnapped Dima. Let me propose an alternative as a way of addressing some of the issues I had with the story. Get rid of the secondary, or perhaps more so, the tertiary villain, whose supervillain alias is the Foreigner. His presence in the film does nothing but further clog and clutter things when you really only needed Nikolai. That's where all the emotional drama and baggage is for Sergei. And then Rhino can be entangled in that because we see how he feels insecure, and Nikolai is one of the men that made him feel small, and this in turn led him to take part in biomedical experiments that gave him these Rhino powers. Make this land that belongs to Sergei something that these powerful figures are trying to acquire. They make a lot of mentions of various plants that grow in that area, and that was actually how Sergei gets discovered and the bad guys figure out where he is. Because of of a specific type of plant he used to make custom poison darts. So you have Nikolai and Rhino trying to get the land so then they could profit off of what's growing there. I think that would have been a better angle for the story to take. And Calypso could be the lawyer trying to help Sergei because by law he's the owner of the land, seeing as how he's inherited it through his mother. That would also fix the problem of too many villains and also facilitate Kraven and Calypso being able to spend more time together. I also just prefer seeing Kraven in his element, and that way we would be able to really lean into this connection he has to nature and wildlife. I had a good time seeing him do things like wrestle with and hiss at a wildcat. Rhino was given far too much airtime. I can see how they wanted to use him as a launch pad for Dima to learn the information he needs to become a chameleon, but they were doing so much extra scheming to do with organized crime groups fighting with one another, and none of that was as interesting or compelling as the family drama part of the story. From what I can tell, there has been no shortage of positive feedback for the action, and that is really deserved, but I still say that this Kravinov family drama is also worthy of praise. Even while I was watching Sergei and Dima have a sweet, loving relationship as brothers, I could still feel this foreboding undercurrent. I didn't know what was going to happen with Dima. I had never heard of Chameleon as a character. I assumed there would be something that would happen since it's a superhero film. So a lot of times supporting leads are pulled into things in one way or another. But I could just feel by the way that these actors were performing and the emotional drama of how much pain exists in this family's history that we were going to get this Shakespearean rift or betrayal of some sort. When it comes to superhero films, people have this expectation going into watching one that you'll see a hero defeat a villain and there will be a big action spectacle for the film's climax.
I went from Bullet Train with 155 pounds to this movie where I'm 200 pounds of muscle, and that was a lot of training. But I had to be agile. There's a lot of stunts, there's a lot of action. A role like this demands for that kind of physicality. And so I was very lucky in the fact that the stunt team invited me in to collaborate with them so that I could be very much involved in a lot of the movements, a lot of the stunts, so that you felt, as an audience, you feel like you really are watching your character go through the motions, right? There's no trickery. We wanted to give it that feel.
And despite the action being good, I actually found that the most satisfying thing about the film's conclusion was all of the fallout of the catastrophic collapse of that family. The way that Aaron plays the scene that he has with his father at the end in this final confrontation, and the camera gets up close and personal so you can see the emotional devastation on his face. He was serving acting, which I appreciated because to an increasing degree it feels like there are often lower quality performances in these franchise blockbusters, but in this moment in particular, that was one where it felt like Aaron was fully committing to the emotional truth of his character. He was emoting everything that this story and character needed for the culmination of what we've seen him go through to reach that point. And maybe I'm just especially prone to being won over by compelling acting. If you perform in a way that I find engaging or interesting, I'm much more inclined to believe and buy into what you're doing. I feel like a lot of leading men in big action films are overly prone to stoicism, and it happens to such an extent that I am unable to emotionally invest in a lot of what I'm seeing. Fred Hechinger was also great as Dima, him still being tragically loyal to the family even when he's being held hostage and his father has no intentions of paying the ransom. That was a fantastic character moment, and again, it goes to show that the family drama is a pillar of why this film is much better than the hate train that exists against it. And also, I'm absolutely biased towards liking it when ultimately the emotional thematic core of the story is about how you grow up experiencing violence. So you try to run away from that violence, only to be faced with a harsh reality that there is a much larger system of violence being perpetrated by cruel, evil men who care first and foremost about power, and thus the only way forward is to fight back. And the film also exposes the hypocrisy of the ideology of the men who perpetuate that system, because what was Nikolai preaching to his sons? Never fear death. Other people are prey, while they, the Kravinovs, are predators. And what did Nikolai do? He feared death, and thus he became prey. I won't know for sure until more time passes, but I actually wouldn't be surprised if Kraven continues to grow on me over time. I might skip through some of the scenes that don't involve at least one person from the Kravinov family, but the good parts, I really enjoyed. If my Venom 3 review hadn't flopped the way that it did, I might have asked to go to an early screening of Kraven the Hunter, but I didn't want to deal with all the hassle if not that many people were going to watch. I do have plans, though, to see Nosferatu early, and then I will be able to finalize my top top 10 films of the year, so you can expect a video on that. I must say, Aaron David Beckham Johnson is getting an extra boost of airtime on my channel right now, and the reason for that is because he's earned it.
You ought to come see this movie because it will not disappoint, I promise you that. I mean, it's full of fantastic action and stunt sequences, but, you know, at the heart of it is a family drama, and it's emotional, and it's entertaining. It's super exciting. We take you on twists and turns, and I think by the time we get to the end, you'll want to see this villain go on to other pastures.
Obviously, we completely encourage people to go out and punch their local cops.
Oh, beat the cops asunder.